Each time you try something new, you get a little braver and you get a little willing to try it again next time.
Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. Because we talk about the possibilities in veterinary medicine here on the podcast, I get some interesting questions. I recently had a father reach out on LinkedIn saying that his daughter wants to be a large animal veterinarian, but their horse veterinarian seems to only have her job. So he asked, do most large animal veterinarians have more than their jobs? I had already wanted to get more equine and large animal veterinarians on the podcast, so it motivated me to reach out to one I had on my list, Dr. Fairfield Bain. He has a very diverse career journey and story, and he was very interested in discussing this question. He is boarded in equine internal medicine and pathology. He is very well known in equine neonatology and perinatology. He has worked at some of the most prestigious equine hospitals and veterinary universities. I can't do his career justice in an intro. He's had lots of interesting twists and turns. I love this conversation, so let's get to it with Dr. Fairfield Bain. What was your life before vet school, and when did you know you actually wanted to become a veterinarian?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually thought about that earlier today because I'm a little atypical. I didn't grow up around horses. I grew up on a farm, a family farm in Southeast Virginia. We had hogs and cattle, but like any other farm kid, we had dogs and other kind of pets. And I grew up in the era of the James Herriot All Creatures Great and Small book series and TV series. And the veterinarians that I was exposed to as a kid were the typical mixed animal practitioners that did everything. And they were sort of like the mentors that I found. So as a kid, I wanted to be a veterinarian because I thought they were cool. They could do anything and everything, and really attracted me to the profession. So that's kind of my start. And so, having spent 40 plus years in the equine world, I just would encourage people that don't grow up around horses, don't think you can't do it. I just fell in love with the horse when I was in school. And that was the transition. I mean, my dad loved to go watch thoroughbred racing. So I had some introductions along the way. And when I was about 9, we got a horse to ride, but I rode a little bit. I wasn't some serious horseback rider, certainly nothing in that regard. But I fell in love with the horse and the diseases the horse had in school, and I just never looked back.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about how you grew up too, because you mentioned you lived on a farm in Virginia, a lot of hogs and other animals, not horses. But your parents, I think, sound also that they had some influence on you as well, because I think you said you ended up being the first in your family to finish college. And of course, you went on to do much more than that. But do you mind sharing a little bit about your parents and your family and how that kind of influenced you as well?
I was really blessed to have a couple of great parents. My dad, his family had owned that farm for generations, and that was, our family place and sort of the soul of our family. And he was not only a farmer, but a business-minded individual and always, trying to get us to excel as kids. I had 2 brothers, so there's 3 boys on a farm, and they raised us. We were all engaged in farm activities. It was just part of our life. The people that worked on the farm and my brothers, my mom, even she had been an obstetrical nurse. She grew up in northeastern North Carolina, not far away from the farm, but had gone into nursing, obstetrical nursing, which has a twisted way of how I followed my own path. But she went and did her obstetrical training in New Jersey, in New York, and the 1940s and 50s. And so we had that blend of her medicine background, especially obstetrics and neonatology, and then the farm background. So we had calves and baby pigs and all that kind of thing. And she was always playing nurse to all of them. And so I got into that, and that was just the life we were in. And yeah, it was kind of like a lot of long hours, but that was just our family lifestyle. It was a rural agricultural environment. And now I think back and how America has transformed since that time, where we're more of a urban, suburban society than rural agricultural. Now that life still exists. It's just, there's a big gap. I think a lot of times we'll probably get to talk about that a little more, but a lot of society doesn't get to live that life. And I was really blessed to see a lot of that. So a lot of the lessons that I got along the way, all the mistakes that got made on the farm, especially with livestock, difficult deliveries and different things like that, came back years later once I went through vet school.
Yeah, I think there's a huge disconnect. My husband actually grew up working a dairy farm. And so he's probably one of the few of his generation that probably still appreciates that, unless you really were born and raised on a farm your whole life. But he has moments where he really misses it too. I think there's just something really special about really understanding the land and the animals, and there's just a special connection.
I could create something that changed society. It would be find a way for young people that are in those urban, suburban environments to go experience life on a farm. And what a transformation, what a blending of society it would be, because people don't know where their food comes from. I mean, there's lots of aspects to it, but it was such a great lifestyle. I would love for more people to see it up close and personal.
I very much agree. Now, for your journey, you said you knew from a young age that these veterinarians, they were kind of superheroes. They could do about anything. And so you went to get your bachelor's degree in science at North Carolina State. And I guess also thinking would be headed to vet school as well. And I think you mentioned that actually horses may have come a little bit later.
Yes.
So when you were getting ready for vet school, how did you choose and find your vet school? And what was that like going through vet school and finding what you really wanted to continue to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're exactly right. I think I still had that role model, of the mixed animal veterinarian when I went off to undergraduate school. And I was in animal science at North Carolina State. And the great part about that was they exposed you to even more aspects of agriculture than I had grown up with. And so that broadened my horizons for sure. But I still had that image of the mixed animal veterinarian interested in everything. And everything that was new was a curiosity. So it was like, it's just like being in the ice cream shop, I think. And it wasn't until that I got in veterinary school, and some of it was the people in my class that I associated with, but some of it was the professors. I went to Auburn University. Of how I got there is back in that time, Virginia and North Carolina both did not have their own veterinary school. So they had what was called the Southern Regional Education Board contracts with different schools, mostly throughout the Southeast. And I ended up getting accepted to Auburn University. And I jokingly say, I don't think I could spell Alabama when I got in to vet school, but I loved it. It was just everything I could have imagined. Every day was something new. And you were invested in the process. Everybody worked hard, but we were all doing it together. And so it was like a team mentality. They made you feel like it was a family. Tests were a little intimidating, but we got through them. Each layer got added on to, and we had a lot of freedoms to go see things in the hospitals, and that just fired you up more. And so as I kept going, I gravitated to the people working on horses, and the more I was around them, and I loved it, and I was fortunate to meet some of the icons in veterinary medicine and equine medicine at the time. And they took me under their wing, and that just kind of helped grow. The mentor effect, I think, was the way it worked.
Yeah. I think mentors influence us so much.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely. And I went to Auburn too, War Eagle. And I was very lucky too. Not only were the teachers fantastic, I had a great class as well. So among us, we really did kind of lean into that mentality of we're here together, and it made the experience a lot more fun. And even though I did this to myself, kind of stressed myself out about over tests and things like that, the people around you, it was really
Right.
wonderful. So I really appreciated that mentality as well.
Yeah.
And
All right. One more thing. I'm sorry about
yeah.
the people around you. We'll come back to that, I bet. But the class. All right. So I'm going to tell how old I am. I was the class of 1983. And if any of my classmates are listening to this, thank you all, because you mentioned a point. The people that are around you can influence your enthusiasm and your performance. And that was it. I give a lot of credit to my classmates because we all pulled each other up.
Yeah. And for those who maybe are going through it right now, take the lead on it. I think it starts with each one of us. We can contribute to that culture because I've seen where classes aren't like that.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine this is a really stressful 4 years. It can be. And so if you aren't leaning in and helping and encouraging each other, it can make that really, really miserable.
Yeah, some
So
they're lifelong friends. We went
like,
through a bonding together, so it was been a good thing.
yes, you want to maintain these good relationships because you never know where
Right.
that can come around again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I know your career has lots of twists and turns, and I think I would just be remiss trying to like ask you all of the little questions. So, what was your journey from vet school and kind of all these different experiences that you had?
Yeah, and it goes back, I think, to role models, people that you see doing things that intrigue you and you like. And so, while I was in school, not only to immerse myself in pretty much everything, I loved just about everything in vet school, but I took the opportunity to do some extra externships while I was in school. I did an externship at the University of Pennsylvania. Some of the faculty members there became role models. I'll name one, Dr. Tom Divers, that was at Cornell for a long time, just recently retired. He was transformative and he was an internal medicine specialist that I loved the way he thought. I loved the way he approached problems and worked through puzzles. And so that became really a model for me. That's kind of turned me into, I want to be an internal medicine specialist. And then another summer, I got to work in England for a practice, Rossdale Equine Hospital. And the two individuals there, Peter Rossdale and Sidney Ricketts, were leaders in equine reproduction and neonatology. And Sidney Ricketts, actually, he also ran the clinical laboratory as well as did the medicine in the practice, and was another key individual that watching him work, I wanted to be like that. And they were the foundations, I think. So the people that I crossed paths with doing those external rotations became some key roadmaps for me. And so after school, I did the internship in the internal medicine residency at the University of Florida, because at the time they were leaders in neonatology, still are. And that was the path that I thought, gosh, I love doing that kind of thing. So because of those role models, I started that way. And then, one role model begets another. While I was doing my residency, I met individuals that were board certified in both internal medicine and pathology. And I thought, oh, wow, they're really cool. I want to be like that. And so another layer got added, and eventually I even went off to do a residency in pathology at Kansas State University. So the role model effect, I think, was a big influence on how my path went in veterinary medicine.
Yeah, and then you found something very different after, getting into the pathology side. You said you went
Yeah,
and worked at a human medical school at Wake Forest
I
and
did. I did.
a little bit
Um,
different
and-
animals, horses.
yeah, different. So my advice to people is don't be afraid to do something different. The driving force was that I had done my residency in pathology. I spent a year back in medicine at the University of Pennsylvania, and I knew I really needed to pass my pathology boards. And I was given an opportunity to be a comparative pathology fellow at Wake Forest University Medical School. And I took that, and it ended up working on monkeys, on cynomolgus monkeys. And I worked in a bone research lab on osteoarthritis of the knee. Kind of became a curiosity because I had injured my knee in my internal medicine residency, and I understood disease of the knee and osteoarthritis up close and personal. But so working on monkeys, but pathology was pathology. And so the mechanisms, that's another thing that I kind of fell in love with over the years, is mechanisms of disease. And so really working on the monkey, even though they're a little different creature, we spent a lot of time talking about mechanisms that cross species boundaries. And it was a unique experience to be in a medical school environment, but we were clustered into a group of laboratory animal veterinarians and pathologists, and was really neat. So I did that for 3 years before I felt the craving to get back in the horse world.
You did, and I think you went and started with a very prestigious equine medical institute in Lexington. And so what was your experience? Because you were there for quite a while,
Yeah. Yeah.
getting in there and working there.
Hagyard Davidson McGee at the time I joined, and they later changed the name to Hagyard Equine Medical Institute. I consider it like the peak of my career. It was a great practice, one of the largest equine practices in the world. And I was really fortunate again to be partnered with somebody who was sort of like a pioneer in internal medicine. And he had started there. Dr. Doug Byers, he had been a faculty member at the University of Georgia as an internal medicine specialist, had joined them a few years before and built a great program. And it was so active. It was really, really busy. We worked really, really hard. Maybe another piece of our conversation about the amount of time that gets invested. But as hard as we worked, we all felt a level of enthusiasm because it was fun. Every day was like we found something new to try. And that, I think, we were all enmeshed in the same mindset. So we were talking about the people around us. We grew from just the two of us to 5 before I ended up moving on, 5 internal medicine specialists. And that place has become a key place for equine internal medicine, as well as other specialties like reproduction. But it was just a time where we were really enthusiastic. We felt really invested, and like we had a lot of freedoms to try new things, to develop new things. And we had a really big, busy caseload to do that with. And yes, we worked really, really hard. There were some days that were really tired in the spring in the equine world, especially where you're in a lot of neonatal environment, is really busy from January to June. By July, you're a little bit tired, but by December, your enthusiasm level was back up and you were ready to go again and think of new things to try for the next season. So it was great. That's I consider one of the peak experiences of my life.
Yeah. Now, also, this one just popped into my head because one of the things I think might be a little bit different with equine medicine versus a lot of others is the human side instead of the other end of the leash, the other end of the bridle. I don't. And the humans that own these horses, the lead. Thank you. Sorry, it's been a little while for me. And so I'm curious, like, what was it like working with the people who owned these horses as well? Because I mean, Lexington is like horse country. So what was that experience like?
It's great. I'd say every place has its unique set of people. It's transformed some over the years, but early on it was predominantly a thoroughbred environment, which is more of a business, and you have different layers. So a lot of times your owners were not always present, but you had the farm management, the farm personnel, the grooms. All of them had different stories depending on their level of involvement. And so you end up learning to talk to different levels of people. And I can tell you some of the greatest stories I can ever remember from my practice career happened at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when somebody brought a sick foal into the ICU, and everybody's busy. Everybody's working hard in the spring. And some guy comes in, a lot of Irish folk, and they love to tell stories, but 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we'd be laughing and hollering because somebody had a great story to tell from their week on the farms. So you had the whole level. And then, you had people who earned Kentucky Derby winners, and they have a different level of expectations. And surprisingly, it wasn't as intimidated. And remember, I said, I didn't grow up in the horse world, but I felt really accepted in that because they weren't really interested on how well I rode or what I had done. They wanted to know my level of medical expertise and that they were getting the best medical care. And I think my encouragement to young people is don't be intimidated to invest yourself in that environment because you build those skills. The best skill you need is learning how to communicate and talk to people. I would say learn how to like people because I can still remember those stories. I can still remember those people. And a lot of them became good friends over the years. And I love that part. Now, that sounds all rosy. The reality is there's some people that aren't so communicative skilled and not as nice. And those days happen. But they're a small percentage compared to the big percentage of people that like to interact and they appreciate what you're doing. So that carries you a long ways,
Well, that's good. And then you also ended up moving away from this facility. Why did you move and where did you go from there?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I loved it and I probably would still be there to tell you the truth. And a lot of things that I've done in my life have been driven by family. And my family to this day, still the most important thing to me. And my father had passed away before I had been there, but my mother was still alive. And so she was older, starting to have health problems. And so I took what was going to be about, a year off and take care of my mom kind of thing. And I just ended up never going back. Another opportunity arose and I ended up going to Colorado for a year. About the same time, one of my clients in Kentucky and I had gotten into a hyperbaric chamber business. And so we were installing a hyperbaric chamber at a practice in Texas. So I went to Texas for 3 years and then on and on. But family things drove a lot of those changes. And so my mom meant everything to me and I was going to go home and make sure that I had some time with her. And then life just happens, and unfolded in ways I didn't imagine. And so that's not bad either, though. I think I look back and I think, gosh, I'm glad I did because I met different layers of people each time I was somewhere different. And then after Texas, I went to Australia for 3 years even. And surprisingly, fell into the Australian culture. I loved it. It struck me as American in the 1960s. The small town atmosphere I lived in was nice. And I worked at the University of Queensland. I came back to America, worked at Washington State University. And so I had each time you go someplace different, you have a new batch of people to learn, a new batch of clients to learn, a new layer of medical problems to learn. So it was a little test to the system, but I think, each time you do something different, that's my advice to young people, you get braver, and I used to tell interns and residents, make it look like you've done 1 million of these and never let them see the fear in your eyes. But each time you try something new, you get a little braver and you get a little willing to try it again next time.
Such great points. One of the ones I want to emphasize again, because I was having a conversation with another colleague about this as well, is as our career evolves, and I want to use the word evolve more than pivoting or something like that, because I think it's just a natural evolution sometimes that a lot of these reasons for change will be non-career related because there's so much to us as human beings. I think we're a passionate bunch. We really like what we do. At the same time, there's a lot more dimensions to us as individual humans. And the family, that all of those things are important. And the embracing of those values and being there for your family, it allows a really beautiful evolution for your career along with it. And embracing that and exploring it and having more of a curious mindset around it, more like, okay, this is a new adventure. I think that's so good for your mental health and, just embracing these things that, a lot of them end up being really unique opportunities where you meet new people. And I think that's what life is kind of made of. And that all kind of works in with the career just along with it.
Yeah, you nailed it. And there's a lot of times there's competition between our professional life and our personal life, right? And that's a lot of things that stress people. And sometimes you don't see it until you're a little bit down the road and you go, wow, that really worked out. Because sometimes you're afraid to make that step, afraid to make that change. You're not sure financially how things are going to work out, how other things are going to work out, all the things that are involved in change. But my advice is don't be afraid, but don't be afraid to have your own priorities. You are a whole person. You said that very well, is you have other aspects to you other than the door of your professional workplace, wherever it may be. And, you are going to be a much happier person and you're going to smile more and kinder to people around you. And you'll find that life is so much better when you try to put all those pieces together and try to invest yourself in other things too. Now that's easier said than done. I can say that. There's the old guy, right? But I encourage people to try to be invested in other things too.
Yeah, and actually that can kind of come back to, the question that I received, and it did come from a parent
Yeah.
who reached out, and I'm not quite sure how he found me because I'm not an equine veterinarian, but I guess maybe he heard of the podcast. I'm not sure. But he reached out and said that his daughter was really interested in equine medicine and she was working with an equine vet. And from the appearance, it seemed that this vet, all he or she did was work. And his question was, can you have a life outside of work? And I think that these are things that we're talking about, right? There was a lot of work that you did, like, especially going back to the practice in Lexington. You said, it was a lot of work. We were excited though. We were working together and it was kind of seasonal, right? You knew that the first half of the year was going to be tons of work. You're still having fun, but you also knew that there was more of a rest period as well. The last part of the year was that opportunity to rest a little bit, get your enthusiasm back, and do it all over again. And I'm sure that those are times where a lot of people are trying to stay away from that term work-life balance. It really depends on the individual. It depends on your situation. When you're fresh out of vet school, and like a lot of us, we aren't married yet, we really lean into it because we're young, we're new, we've got the energy. But like that may not be your whole life. And so understanding how to incorporate all of these things, I think, is important, no matter what area of medicine you go into.
Yeah, the way you framed when you showed me the question that was asked, I was like, well, there's a lot of aspects to it. Yeah, there's a lot of work and, but there's a lot of work in other things. When we were talking the other day, I mean, if you're a lawyer, when you get out of law school, you're going to bust your butt. You're going to try to build your clientele. You're going to spend a lot of hours. A businessman a person that's trying to ascend their way into the business life, an entrepreneur, they're going to put in lots and lots of hours. So that way in a lot of things. Okay. And, I go back to the urban, suburban, rural agricultural divide is we do see a lot of people that don't understand livestock and horses just, I consider them livestock as well as companion animals, but they're like other livestock. They demand a lot more. And you did say, when you're starting out, you're going to spend a lot more hours. An intern, you should expect to work a lot of hours. But the other thing about it is you should be like soaking it up because you're learning all kinds of new things. Pay attention to the people that are your mentors, and hopefully you have good ones. Admittedly, there's some people that aren't as good at teachers, but a lot of people are. And that's probably the best part of my life was teaching young people what I had experienced. And they go, oh yeah, here's that Dr. Bain telling us his old man stories again. But it's fun. I enjoy that. And if when you start out, soak all that stuff up because all those other people's experiences you can use. And it's like getting an extra level of school. And then, yes, it's going to be times where it's really hard. Even seasonally experienced practitioners spend lots and lots of hours. I would bet you that a lot of them will tell you it's the best part of their lives because they love it. If you really love it and you're in a group of people like I described, where you're all invested in it and you're feeding each other's enthusiasm, that day won't seem so bad. And the stories you'll get from it down the road are going to be so great for your life, I think. Now, the voice thing. So the dad that asked that question, that can create a stress in your life if you've got voices that don't understand what you do. And I've thought about that a lot because, like I said, we're predominantly an urban suburban society that doesn't understand rural agricultural culture and lifestyles so much that do require lots of hours. And when you're trying to be in one culture and the other culture's pulling at you a little bit and they go, oh, you're spending all these hours doing all this. But you have to be careful with all those voices because the wrong voice is going to create more stress in your life when you're trying to accomplish the mission of developing yourself. And so you almost have to protect yourself and decide the right voices to listen to. I think they're not evil. They just don't understand that culture, I think. And, there's a balance. But the seesaw tips one way and then the other sometimes. And like we said, there's seasons of life and seasons of the year in the profession where you're going to put in lots of hours. But I think you get to a point after you invested some of yourself in that short term where you look back and go, gosh, I feel really proud about what I've accomplished. And that's the part for me is that I want young people to feel is that they got into this because they like medicine. They love the process, whatever direction they choose. And then they build something that they become proud of. And I promise you that part right there will make the professional life for you because you'll come away feeling good about yourself. And that's the part I wish for young people in veterinary medicine and equine medicine, especially because it seems that the numbers entering are not equaling the numbers leaving, and we need more young people in equine veterinary medicine. And I can tell them that it's great fun.
Yeah, I think I shared this with you too. I had two, parents that both had big careers. So my dad's a child psychiatrist. My mom is a teacher and got her master's in early childhood and development. Yes, you can blame them if I'm kooky, but both are. They were very passionate about the careers, right? And so even though neither one was a veterinarian, I think they got me being very passionate about this thing I was pursuing. And I think that's really helpful. And this father who reached out, he's doing it in the heart of love. He cares about his daughter. It is good to make sure that you are around people. And it doesn't have to be necessarily other veterinarians. I know there's a lot of vets who marry vets. I really didn't want to marry a vet, but I did marry a very hardworking person. And so he does appreciate that. So, surrounding yourself with people who at least get it, the drive to do something in your career that is meaningful to you. Not everybody, sometimes job is just for money and that's fine if that's what they want to do. That's usually not the people who are attracted to this profession. So just, yes, making sure that you do have the good support system and just to understand, if somebody does express concern, where that's coming from and just kind of, take it with all the understanding, appreciate their concern for you, but also know, I am doing this because I am very passionate about this. I want to be proud that I'm doing this work for, a bigger good or whatever your value is. And I think that is another aspect that you just naturally find a better, again, avoiding the word balance, but I'm going to say it anyway, balance, right? You find it because it's so rewarding. I think.
Yeah. I can't tell you now. I'd be lying if I didn't say there were some days where it just was a tough day, but the great majority of them, I loved going to work and doing what I got to do. And yeah, that suit that you're in, the people that have those encouraging voices, you got to kind of sometimes dig down in your own personal value system and go, this is what I'm really passionate about. I think that's what we are as veterinarians. We do all this mostly because we're passionate about taking care of animals. And it's a little bit more than just loving animals, right? But you get passionate about the medicine and you're invested in that. You're with people that encourage you. I think the hope is that the people that are around you that aren't in your professional life see that passion and see you building something. And you may have to explain that sometimes, but let them see that. And I think they will be, gosh, you'd have to think a father who sees his daughter go build something like that has to have some pride and go, gosh, my daughter did that. That's what you want for, our family connections, encouraging and supportive and watch you grow. Yeah, they may have to be there when you have a tough day too. That's okay. But back to the dad's question is, yeah, you can have a life, but sometimes there are going to be seasons that are going to be tough and support your daughter while she's battling through it.
Exactly. And some other questions that I often get, probably the nature of the podcast, is how do you know what to do when you're ready for a change? So this is probably coming from somebody who is they have an inner stirring, right? It's I am ready for something different. And I just don't know where to start. And a lot of times it's just life kind of presents itself, because I know back to your journey, I think we left you at the University of Washington and you were really enjoying that. You were loving the mentoring interns and residents and students. and you had to leave, and that was for another family issue. So do you mind sharing that, and then how you, again,
Yeah.
started to get into different aspect of career?
Yeah. No, I did. Washington State University is a great place, and I love the people there still. Scroll back one step before that is, the reason I went to Australia, my mom had passed away and I felt like a little more freedom. And so Australia is a whole nother country, a different way, a long ways away. So I had that freedom to go do that. And at that time, then it was just my one brother and I were the last family members taking care of the farm in Virginia. And my brother had developed cancer, and they had given him a very short lifespan. So Washington State was really kind to give me a leave of absence. My brother outlived my leave of absence, though. I was glad I did. I went home and just helped with the management of the farm. And I was trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do with myself professionally? And a friend of mine that I had worked with before, a surgeon, introduced me to Merck Animal Health. And so I ended up joining Merck Animal Health as a technical services veterinarian. But it was great because I got to walk in the door of lots and lots of practices of people, a lot of the people I had met before in my professional career, but I could walk in giving advice for the company as well as internal medicine advice or pathology advice. And so I was able to use my background and skills in a whole different world with, I wasn't the primary patient care person, but I was either in somebody's practice or on the phone almost every day talking about issues and different practices all over the country. So I enjoyed that. Talk about a different path, and it was an unexpected path, but it was another one that built lots and lots of layers of relationships all over the place. So again, it was kind of an unexpected thing, and it was a family issue that made me start looking at, well, what are my options to do? Because I knew the right thing to do was to go home. And even though I really love my job, my priority has always, like I said, been my family. And so I went home for family reasons, but I found a whole new pathway, not something that I had planned. And I did that for 7 years, actually. I really enjoyed it, and I'm grateful to Merck for the opportunities they gave me.
I don't know exactly where the MBA fits in, but I think, you had an MBA and you were leveraging the business side of your interests and skill set as well. And you were really starting to bring a lot of the different skills and interests that you had. I think it sounds like in this environment as well. So did you want to share anything about,
Oh, yeah.
bringing in an MBA and, and all of that too?
I blame my mom. I love my mom. She's my greatest hero in life. Like I said, she was an obstetrical nurse and involved in the beginnings of human neonatology. So she role model for sure, but she was a lifelong learner. So was my dad, really. He had an incredible library. Both of them taught us to be continual learners, but my mom especially. And so she just imprinted on me reading and learning. And so scroll back into the years when I was in Kentucky at Hagyard's, I had gotten involved in a company that made hyperbaric chambers for animals. And part of my role was educating veterinarians in the physiology of hyperbaric medicine and that kind of thing. And I thought, well, maybe I should learn some business. And I probably could have just taken a business course or two, but then instead I enrolled in an online MBA program. And a whole different thing because I was new to Excel spreadsheets and all that stuff and financial calculations and things. And that was a little different. There's a little stress to the system to do that. But I would do that in the evenings after I came home. And it took me a couple years, 2.5 years to do that. But it gave me an extra layer of thinking because it was a little bit different when you think about business structures. And it has come back around. My parents both were kind of entrepreneurial minded, especially my dad. But years later, so then I'm in Merck, and I ended up joining their business development group because not only did I have the background in medicine and learning, well, what's important for the horse as far as good medical principles, but I was able to take the MBA skills and put them into how to build business assessments, networking with people that had startup company ideas and trying to do calculations about whether that made good business sense. What's the market size for that potential product idea and those kind of things. And so I've used it many times in many ways, and I still do. So it was a useful thing. Do I tell everybody you need to go to business school? No, you don't need to. Matter of fact, and my wife is an entrepreneur. She didn't go to business school. She's quite successful. So you don't need an MBA. But again, I was around a few people at the time. The CEO of Hagyard's at the time was a guy named Dr. Ed Block, who was a veterinarian with a master's in reproduction, but he got an MBA and was a business consultant and advisor. And he was a great role model. And he was one of the reasons I started down the MBA path too.
And I know that, you enjoyed your time at Merck, but were maybe wanted to do the last little bit back as an internist. And so went to Tennessee to work with them. Did you want to share a little bit about as you were coming to I might, we don't use the word retire because most of us have a hard time retiring. And I know you're not allowed to say that word. but as you were thinking about transitioning into something a little bit different, you really wanted to get back to horses. So what was your thought process there and kind of where you are today?
Well, I knew that, that's always the thing. It was always my love was the Dr. House approach, figuring out the puzzle and all that. And for you young people that don't remember the TV show, Dr. House, it's a great TV show. It's worth binge watching some weekend. But it was solving the puzzle of internal medicine, the complicated medical problem of the sick horse. And I loved that. And so I had an opportunity to go to Tennessee Equine Hospital, south of Nashville. And it was more like I proved to myself I could still do it. And I loved it. And again, you got to meet a whole new set of people, a new system, the interns, the technicians, the clients, the horses. It was great. So I did that for a little over a year. And then I stepped away at the 1st of July because I'm back home in my house in New Mexico doing business consulting for animal health companies.
Excellent. And you talked about the technicians right then, and I think I saw you either reshare a post or post about equine technicians. Mm. And if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your thoughts and what you've seen, what are the career opportunities for technicians who are interested in staying in equine medicine?
That's a great point. And we talk about ourselves because we're veterinarians, right? But the whole team makes the thing. And the nursing care, I couldn't have done any of what I've done in my career as an internist without good technical staff. And I've come to appreciate them so much. I have so many, if I start naming names, I'd be here for a day. But there's some outstanding ones, and they taught me medicine. I would even tell some of them, I would tell interns, if she says that you need to ultrasound this foal's abdomen, she probably knows what she's talking about. So learn, they're teachers too. They're like your arms. They reach out. They do a lot of the patient care. They pay attention even more because we have a different path right in our day. And without the competent technician taking care of the patient, it gets a lot harder. And that has grown. I've watched from when I was young. Now I think the role of the technician or veterinary nurse has expanded so much. They are growing leaps and bounds with their own specialties and things. And I can't applaud them enough. And so I hope they continue to grow. They continue to be elevated in the professional world and are appreciated more. They're way underpaid, no doubt. I hope that changes too. That's my cheerleader thing for the technician world is I want the veterinary profession to make them on a much higher level and they are financially rewarded for what they do, because without the nursing staff, patient care doesn't exist. And the veterinarian can't do all that themselves. The owners most often the owners are untrained and either unwilling or don't have the time, don't have the knowledge base. And especially when it comes to taking care of sick or critically ill animals, they really need skilled nursing staff. And so I just can't applaud them enough. They've made my life so much better. So if you wanted me to play cheerleader too, besides young veterinarians, technicians, I love you all.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. I hope that gives a lot of encouragement to people who are interested in getting in equine careers. And so I have a couple final questions for you. And one is inspired by you because you said one of the things you really want for veterinarians and, well, vet techs as well is really to do something that they can reflect back on and feel very proud about. So you've done a lot. So this is probably a very unfair, very hard question. But when you look back, what are some of the things that you are most proud of?
For years, I saw myself as a neonatologist, perinatologist, and I've done it in different places at different levels, from basic to very, very advanced. And so I think of the things and experiences that I've had over the years, being involved in growing the world of neonatology and perinatology is probably one of the things that I feel the most proud of. And it kind of comes back to some family things. If I want one person to be proud of what I did, my mom. And that was her start. And so that was sort of the imprint that I started out on. And I probably didn't really realize it at the time. But I think back, my mom, her claim to fame was she delivered Frank Sinatra's baby. She was so proud of that. But she was really involved in the early stages of neonatology and human medicine. And I watched that grow and since the 1980s, and I was really fortunate to work with some of the leaders in the profession in that particular specialty. So I am proud of that. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you've also seen the human side grow since I'm going to give birth here in a little over a month. That's good to hear. Oh, and then finally, what is something when you think about gratitude and being grateful, what is some of the first things that come to your mind?
Oh, you have a lot of things that you take for granted. I'm sure as a kid, I took for granted growing up on that farm. And now that I live a life like a lot of people, I live kind of a lifestyle, a little bit rural, but live in the mountains in New Mexico. I'm kind of a hermit. The opportunity to grow up in an environment like that, I am grateful for. I'm grateful for the people that stepped up along the way. Those mixed animal practice veterinarians that took me under their wing. I'll name one. His name is Dr. Rylan Edwards, still alive, still ticking. Incredible man. His two sons are veterinarians. It was an imprint in his family. He was an imprint in the community, but he took me under his wing and taught me a lot about not only being a veterinarian, but being a good people person. So there are people like that along the way. And then all the mentors along my path and people I got to work with. I'm really grateful that I got to cross paths with people like that. And I mentioned the technicians. Oh my gosh. Some days I think about them, I almost want to start tearing up because I really loved my days with all those people. And so you look back on your path and you go, gosh, it was really hard some days. But a lot of those good days were because of all the people that I got to work with.